All right, so let's go ahead and get started since it is time. So as always, welcome to Physics Seminar. Some of you are new to these things, I think. I don't see a lot of fresh faces. So every week we offer a physics seminar. They're free and open to the public, so if you're off at this time, feel free to stop by at any time. Check one out. Next week, Tom Morrison, a physics major who's a senior, will be giving his presentation on his original research. He's working with Professor Jared Working this year on, guessing something to do with computational astrophysics. Is that right, Tom?
That's right.
That is correct. All right, so anyway, Tom will be giving a presentation next week. This week, my colleague, Professor David Collins, is going to be giving, it's not a research talk like he normally gives, but rather an REU talk on research experience for undergraduates. So let's welcome our speaker, David Collins.
Okay, so I'm getting welcome to do sort of a sales pitch. I mean, this is kind of a sales pitch essentially. The idea, what I want to do today is describe to you, particularly undergraduate students, aspects of a variety of programs that are designed to give undergraduate students meaningful research experiences during the summer. So just before I actually get into the detail of these, maybe I should sketch out kind of a little bit of the academic landscape. Most of you here, when you're here at CMU, most of your time engaged with sort of physics or chemistry or whatever your major is, has to do with coursework. You're sort of, you're in classes, you're doing homework, you've got exams and things like that. And probably that might be how you think about your particular subject. But actually, if you do actually work in physics or chemistry or biology or whatever, if you work in those disciplines professionally, most of your time is not consumed with coursework. Most of the time you're spending your efforts doing research. So professional science people their lives consist essentially of doing research. And this research is sort of very different to what you might have experienced here, although there are some of you who may have done research here. It's not sort of looking at literature and doing a summary of literature. It's actually coming up with new ideas about issues that haven't really been addressed yet and so on within your discipline. The way in which this proceeds is very different to the way in which you proceed when you are sort of working through a course. There is no textbook, for example, for whatever issue you're looking at. There might be some journal literature and so on, which is very different in style to the kind of the kinds of things that you read in textbooks and so on. There are no homework assignments or anything like that. A problem that you might be looking at if you're doing research may not even have an answer. You may not be able to answer it. You wouldn't know this at the outset. Normally, when we give you problems in coursework, we know whether or not they have an answer and whether or not you can get to the answer. It's not like that in research, so the world of research is very different. And part of the idea behind these programs that I'm going to describe to you is to sort of expose you to that kind of world, okay? Kind of get you out of your classes and coursework and into kind of get you a taste of the world of what sort of happens in kind of professional science. If you do research, if you end up working professionally as a physicist or biologist or whatever, your day-to-day life will actually be very different to what it is now when you're doing courses. Some people in certain programs here are required to do research. So for example, in physics, we require our graduating seniors to do 1 credit hour of research per semester. That translates into about 2 or 3 hours of work per week on a research project. Those projects are very frequently highly structured. Your supervisor will sort of step you along the way oftentimes. The supervisor may even actually know what the answer might kind of be like to the issue that you're looking at. If you're working on professional research, you will spend, 6, 7, 8 hours per day working on your research, not 2 or 3 per week. That's what you will be doing all the time. I mean, pretty much all the time. There's some time when you'll be, installing software on your computer or whatever. But most of the time you will be spending doing research. So if you're thinking you're going to end up sort of doing research in a science discipline, most of your day will be spent doing something that you are actually not doing most of the day now. This kind of research happens at institutions that are rather different in style to ours. We're primarily focused on undergraduate students here. At big research institutions like the University of Colorado, for example, the scale of things is much, much larger than it is here. And part of the idea behind many of these research programs I'm going to describe to you is to kind of expose you to what that world looks like. It, to my mind, actually looks very different to what your world probably looks like, at least when you're sort of dealing with Colorado Mesa University. There are things, for example, if you went to, say, the physics department at the University of Colorado, I haven't actually been there myself, but it's probably similar to the place where I did my graduate studies. Most of the faculty people there are devoting most of their efforts to producing new research about new issues. The teaching is a sort of a side thing for them. The scale of their resources is very much larger. So I actually looked this up, and our annual budget for our entire institution here is probably, I think it's about $100 million. Do you guys know that? For the entire Colorado Mesa University. That's all of our operations. So the University of Colorado, their physics department is actually ranks fairly highly in research budget. Their research budget is, in the physics department, is about $50 million per year. So and that's not just because they're sort of waiting around in money. It just is very expensive. There's large resources. The equipment is very expensive. There are things on a scale which you cannot encounter here. So many of these programs that I'm going to describe to you will sort of introduce you to that kind of world, which looks very different to your kind of world now. Okay, so what I'm going to describe to you are a certain class of programs. The purpose of these programs is specifically to give undergraduate students exposure to research, and to give undergraduate students a meaningful research experience, to give you sort of a taste of what this might look like. In the sciences, so in the natural sciences and the physical sciences, biology, chemistry, in the sciences, mathematics, and engineering, the sort of primary driver of this is a federal government agency called the National Science Foundation. So this is their webpage here, nsf.gov. And they have a large program called REU, so that's Research Experience for Undergraduates. And this is the thing you should probably be looking at. So if you go to the NSF's website and you type in REU, it's a little opaque, this website. So you type in REU, I need to search there. All right, you get all kinds of things. You get information there about what happens if you actually want to set up an REU program. That's not you. That's for people at universities. So I would click on the very first thing, search for an REU site, and this will give you the kind of information that you should look at. Let's see, do something. Okay, all right. Okay, so this National Science Foundation runs this big program called REU. And what you might see here is, first of all, this REU site lists things by disciplines. Almost every natural science, I think, is represented there. So let's see, can I enlarge that? This website's rather government kind of fine print type of website, So yeah, there we go. So it lists it by discipline, and this particular page is sort of geared towards providing you a way for finding these REU opportunities. Okay, so you can see all sorts of disciplines are represented there. I'm mostly going to talk about physics because that's what I know about, but the same sort of things apply elsewhere. This REU program is a huge program within the National Science Foundation, and what they've done is kind of farm it out to various campuses. And we're not one of those campuses here, at least in physics, we're not one of those campuses. So if I click on physics here, you'll get a second, you'll see what I mean in a second. You'll see there's a whole list of places, so-called REU sites, where these programs actually happen. So, Alabama A&M University, Baylor University, Brigham Young University, Bucknell University, I actually used to be there, and so on. And I'm actually, there's several pages here, and I'm going to actually look at the second page, because there's a useful one there I can find. And so these programs are sort of farmed out. So there's various host sites. These are all host sites at typically larger universities, research-oriented universities, and also at some national laboratories in the United States. So what do these programs consist of? Well, it actually varies depending on the particular host, although they all have sort of a fairly similar flavor. So I'm just going to, while I talk about this, scroll down here and see. You can see all sorts of universities, some of whose names you may recognize, some of whom you'll never have heard of. And there's the one I'm looking for right there. But generally what happens is each of these programs takes some number of undergraduate students, probably anywhere between 5 and 15, at least in physics. Each of those students will go and live in that city or on that campus for around about 10 weeks. That also varies a little bit. Students are paid in order to do this, so that's something that's really pretty exceptional about this. You're paid some stipend, you're paid to travel there. Depending on how things are arranged, you might actually be given accommodation while you're there. I think for the most part, most students who do these things actually don't wind up having to pay for the experience themselves. They get money out of it. Then within each of these programs, you will work with probably, this also varies depending on how things are structured, but you are typically working with a particular faculty supervisor or maybe a graduate student who will supervise you on one project that will sort of span the duration of that 10 weeks, and you'll spend your day kind of working on a research project like you would if you were eventually going to do research sort of at a professional level. Now these things sort of vary depending on campus, and I think I found that this one actually works out. Okay, so we're saying goodbye to the National Science Foundation. And so this is like the University of California at Davis. Their physics program has one of these REU programs, and you can see here they sort of spell out what it is that goes on. There's a 10-week program, something to do with housing. There's a stipend, $450 a week. That is sort of fairly typical kind of amount. There's probably a list of research projects. That's these over here. Information for how you apply and so on. And these will look very different from one institution to another. So like I say, this whole REU program sort of farmed out to various institutions, and then it's up to them as to how to administer it within certain parameters. So that's sort of basically how one of these REU things works. So if you applied for one of these and you were successful, you would go and spend your time, if you applied for this one, you would go and spend your time in Davis, California, working on some other physics project, and I don't know what all those are, but it depends on their interests. One of the things about this I want to point out is that these REUs, my understanding at least, is that the purpose of these is to provide a meaningful experience for an undergraduate student. The purpose is not to provide cheap labor for the supervisor. At least that's not there. I mean, that is actually a part of research. If you are a postdoctoral research assistant, if you've got a PhD, and you go and work in somebody's lab, your purpose is to do work for that person, and probably do work a little bit for yourself and enhance your career. You are getting paid to crank out results for that person. This is not the idea here. The idea here is you're getting paid to have an experience that will give you an idea of what it might be like to go to graduate school, to work professionally doing research. And if they're treating you like cheap labor, well, then you should probably complain to the National Science Foundation. So that's sort of the idea. And so, this is really pitched at you undergraduate students. It's sort of centered on you. And I think this is a great opportunity that you should think about. Now, a couple of nuts and bolts about this. If you go and look at, let's see, this website's actually fairly well organized. There are some sort of stipulations about eligibility and so on. You can see the typical things here. You have to be a US citizen or permanent resident. You have to have done 1 year of college, or probably all of you have done that. And here's something that you really need to pay attention to. You cannot do this after you've gotten your degree. Okay, you have to be coming back to do your degree. If you're a senior and you're planning on graduating in May, these REU programs are, you're not eligible for them. So you have to be thinking about doing this like in your sophomore year or your junior year and so on. The applications, those vary. When those are due vary, and what you actually have to do for an application varies. One thing I can tell you is that they're mostly free. Okay, so you can apply for as many of them as you like. But they're typically due sort of in January through March. For this coming summer, it'll be January through March 2014. It varies what they require. Sometimes they require you to fill out a form, they write some sort of statement, essay of some sort. But one thing you do need to pay attention to is they almost always require some letters of recommendation, and you will probably be asking faculty, supervisors, or people who've taught you in courses for those things. it can take a while to generate a letter of recommendation. If you ask me to write you a letter of recommendation that needs to be there tomorrow, it probably won't happen. So there's a lot of other things to do before tomorrow. You have to give whoever's going to ask you, whoever you're asking a letter of recommendation some time. Okay, so this is the big thing you should be looking at. If you're thinking of doing this kind of research, you should be looking at these REU programs. They're really great opportunities for you to get a feel for the world of research. If you're thinking of grad school, this is a really great idea. If you do well, you'll be able to get a recommendation from somebody, a letter of recommendation that might get you into a good graduate program from somebody who has actually seen you work in the way that you will have to work when you go to graduate school. Most people have pretty good experiences, at least most people I've spoken to have had pretty good experiences with these REUs. If you don't have a good experience, that actually may not be bad either. Okay? If you find that you cannot stomach working 7 or 8 hours on one particular project for 10 weeks, well, you're not going to be able to work for 3 years on one project all day long, which is what you would have to do in graduate school, and it's good to learn that now rather than when you go into graduate school. But those experiences are fairly rare. Most people actually do pretty well with these. So if you're interested in this, go to the NSF's website, type in REU, and navigate the way that I did, and you will find perhaps a program that is to your liking. So we actually have a couple of students here. Let's see. So Jamie Stevens, who is in the physics major, Erin Nissen, who is a chemistry major. Is Rachel here? No, Rachel's not here, is she? Yeah. And then Professor Lisa Driscoll has actually been on the other side of the REU experience recently, supervising students, not here in Colorado Mesa University. Oh, I should point that out. We don't have an REU site. We don't have any REU sites here at the moment. So if you wanted to do this, you would have to spend your summer somewhere else. There is that. Anyway, so maybe you can spend 5 minutes telling people what you did and how you liked it and so on.
So I did an REU at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and I worked on theoretical physics. So I sat at a computer and did a lot of calculations and then plotted my data. I got paid $5,000 for the summer. It was 10 weeks, and they also paid for me to fly down there, and they paid for my apartment, and I had to pay for my food. They didn't give me like a food allowance or anything. And I had a lot of fun. Some of the other kids in my REU didn't really like it, like he said, but then they realized that that wasn't really what they wanted to do.
How many other people were there?
There was 12 people, 4 girls and 8 boys. It was physics, so not very many girls. We also did workshops on every Friday. We had like a field trip where we went and toured a lab, and then at the end of the program, instead of doing a tour, we did a writing and presentation workshop. And then at the end of the REU, we had to produce a paper and do a 15-minute presentation. And the paper was like the style that you would submit to a journal if you were submitting. So we got to learn how to like format a paper that you submit to a journal.
Was it a good experience?
Yes, it was a good experience.
Did you work on the weekends, or was this like more 9 to 5? Did you work late at night?
For probably up until like the last 3 weeks, I worked pretty much like 30 hours a week. Only during the week. We had weekends free. And then towards the end, we had to produce a paper and make a presentation and finish up our results. So then I started working a lot more the last 3 weeks. Yes?
Did you collaborate with your associates on what you were working on and what they were working on? Did you throw back ideas on the studies and stuff?
So my experience was a little different in that way. Most of the other kids in my REU worked in a lab, and so there was only 3 people working on theoretical projects. So for the lab, you're working with several, like maybe a couple undergraduates, several grad students, and then like a professor. But mine was like just my professor and me. So I would talk to my professor if I got stuck, but it was pretty much just me and him working together.
Okay.
Yes.
When you said you got to tour labs and whatnot, did they take you through different kinds of labs, or was it primarily like one field within the university?
So it was all different ones. We went and we did mostly physics labs. We also went to the Brain Institute, and we went to the nanotechnology lab. We went and toured the magnet lab in Tallahassee. So mostly physics, but there was like a couple non-physics stuff that we toured. That's pretty much it.
So Aaron, so we should have some time for sort of general questions. It's good that you ask questions now, that's fine, but we will have time for more questions, in 10 minutes.
Okay. I did a chemistry REU this summer. I did my REU on organic chemistry. I went to Wellesley College, which is out in Massachusetts. It's like 30 minutes from Boston. And I went to an all-women's college, so it was a lot of women. And the REU was split. It was kind of different. So there was a bunch of different chemistry REUs going on. So each professor had like their own research going on. So per each professor, there was like 6 or so students. In total, I think there was probably like 30 to 40 chemistry students there. And then there was also like a physics REU, a math REU, a biology, a geology. So in total, there was probably like 80 of us there, 80 to 90 students working on science. It was required that you were there every day from 9 to 5. With chemistry though, like that's kind of hard to say, because if you start a reaction, like start doing something at 3, you can't just like be like, all right, peace out everybody, hope it doesn't explode. Like you're there till 7. So it was 40 hours a week plus I got paid $6,000, so I mean, you make bank. It's a lot more than my other summer job that I had the year before that. My housing wasn't paid for though. That's a little bit different for Wellesley, but that was, so after housing, I made $4,500, and then my flight was paid for both ways. They didn't give us a food allowance, but I mean, they fed us every Wednesday there was a talk, and since it was like all different sciences, we got talks from all different interdisciplinary sciences every Wednesday, and they would feed you. And then throughout the whole program, which was 10 weeks, there were different nights where they would have like a grad school panel, or they would have a med school panel, or industry panel, all these random things, GRE night, and they would feed you every time. And then also every week there was also a like chemistry talk. So the chemistry would go to the chemistry talk, and the physics would go to the physics talks. Like the psychology would go to the psychology talks. So that was really cool. Oh, if you're really interested, you should try to make sure wherever you go there's psychology going on at the same time, because they will pay you to participate. I made extra money on the side just participating in the psychology stuff. Just like pressing green lights and stuff. Waiting for my reaction to get done. And so that was a bonus. You don't work on the weekends. So I went to like Cape Cod, and I went to New York twice because I was out over there. One thing that I would say is that really look into where you're applying, because last year I was like, I just really, really want one. Like I don't care where, like what I'm doing. I mean, I like made sure I thought it was somewhat interesting, but I was glad that I actually chose the one that I thought was the most interesting, because there were girls there that just hated it. Like it was not what they wanted to do day in and day out. There were like people who were doing it for med school so that it would look good on their resume, and they were like, I don't want to be mixing these chemicals. I want to be working with humans, and they would cry. And then some people like were like, I kind of like this, but I'm more biochemistry versus organic chemistry. And so that kind of like taught them what path they should take. So I guess that was good coming out of it, but really read those abstracts. They'll like put an abstract up there on what you're going to be doing or what they're, and if you don't think it's interesting, just like keep going, because at 10 weeks of your life, just like doing that.
So you must be in the category of being able to do this again, is that correct?
Yes, I will be applying again for this summer, and I will be slightly devastated if I don't get to do another one. That's how much fun I had. So, yes. Yeah.
Were you more hands-on with the studies, and did you have to write a lot of like papers and results and stuff like that?
Did you say write or read? I mean,
Right.
yes, I read a lot of
No, right.
papers. We had to give a presentation halfway through, like a PowerPoint presentation, and then at the very end we had to give a poster presentation. We didn't actually have to write results. Well, I mean, I had to write I write 2 abstracts, but that's about it. We didn't have to write a paper on mine, just because organic chemistry goes a bit slower than you'd like it to. But mine was also a lot more collaborative. So I worked in my lab, the Haynes lab, had 8 people in it, which is pretty big for a lab. And we would talk about things all the time, like, hey, how did you do that? Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should do that. Oh, that was supposed to be in the dark. Maybe I should wrap my beaker in tinfoil next time. Dang it. And then my PI, my professor, was really hands-on, and so I just go and knock on his door, help me.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so Lisa, Professor Lisa Driscoll, who's in mathematics, did an REU a long time ago. Is that right? And
Yes.
that is sort of how you ended up here eventually. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, so I've been on both sides. 10 or 11 or 12 years ago, I was a student at an REU. Actually, it was over there, at Grand Valley State University in Michigan, and then also at Central Michigan University. And then this past summer, I was one of the faculty advisors on a project at the Central Michigan University REU. And so, I don't know if they're different types of things. I can talk about a lot. So, math is very different, and I don't know if many of you are that interested in the math one, but I'll say a couple things. It's very different because we don't have a lab. We have pads of paper and pencils, and sometimes a computer. And so we can do it anywhere. We don't have to be at the big universities with big labs. We at small schools. We can sit out in the park with our pads of paper or in a classroom or wherever. And the kind of idea of it is that us as the faculty want to interact with the students as colleagues. We aren't there to hover over, to instruct, to direct you. It's more of a collegial relationship, and so it's a project. If you've written proofs before, it's not one of those proofs that takes a day to write. It's one of those that takes 4 weeks to write, or maybe 8 weeks or more. At the Central Michigan REU, it was 8 weeks, so the math ones tend to be 8 weeks. It's hard to go 6 to 8 hours a day for more than 8 weeks when you're thinking that hard. The students, I think, got about $4,200 plus $100 a week for food, housing in an apartment, $500 for travel, and $500 toward a conference. So the students at that REU, part of the requirement is that they do present at a conference. We also did have our own mini conference. There were several math REUs in Michigan every summer, and so we had a mini conference with 3 or 4 other programs where all the students did present 20-minute talks. At the end of the program, everyone's required to have a report, a nice typed up report, and then some of those turn into publications. And in fact, one of our students who did one this summer, they kind of added on to some part of the project that's been ongoing, and that has been submitted, and I believe possibly even accepted for publication. And so you can end up with a publication as an undergraduate.
Were you, did you look at applications?
Yes.
So how, maybe you can explain just a little bit how, well, this varies from one place to another, but kind of
Yes.
how did it work? And how many applicants did you get? How many people did you accept, and that sort of thing?
So the program, I believe in the end we had maybe 10 who were funded by the NSF, and I probably looked at 250 applications. And so with the applications, you include the normal stuff, what classes have you taken, that sort of thing, so we make sure you have the right background, and a personal statement. And that's your chance to get their attention, to wow the person. Everybody's who is applying has taken whatever courses it is in your field, and they've done well in them. So just having a good transcript isn't necessarily enough. You want to show that you actually are interested, that you have some sort of passion for it. Maybe a story about when you were a kid and what got you interested in chemistry. You know, you watched something blow up. I don't know. Why are you in the field you're in, and why do you think this summer experience is the right thing for you to do? A lot of the applications I read said, I want to go to grad school, so I want to do this REU to see what I want to study in grad school. Everyone said that, and it wasn't a very good answer because number one, there are so many little tiny subfields in math that what you study as an undergraduate, I mean, there's so many things that are not accessible to undergrads. And so it's not the place to find out what you want to study. Now it is the place to find out if it's for you. Can you sit in a room for 6 hours working on trying to write a proof and do that day after day? And for some people it was great. Rachel, who I don't know if she's going to come in later,
No.
had a fabulous time, absolutely loves it. And that's true for a lot of people who do it, because those are the people we're looking for in the application. Can we tell from your application that you actually want to do it because you want to, not because someone told you it would look good on your resume? At least that's what I thought when I read that. There are struggles, and so it is still, again, a good representation of grad school, because there are days where you just want to burst into tears, maybe. Days where you think, is this really for me? Do I fit in? Am I good enough to be around these other students who are doing it? And the answer is always yes. And the other answer is everybody feels that way at some point. I found that out in grad school too. Even the most brilliant students in my class, I found out that they had the same feelings everyone else did, that every once in a while you have a bad day.
Okay.
So I have a question. So would you say that you look at more the personal statement versus like a resume, or like should you bring up stuff from your resume in your personal statement, or?
I didn't have to look at resumes,
Oh, okay.
so I don't know.
That's
I mean, I looked at transcripts, I looked at what courses you've taken and will have taken before the program starts, and then pretty much the personal statement. And there were some personal statements that were 1 or 2 sentences long, and it's like, that's not quite enough. Some people actually got a lot across in 2 sentences, and it turned out to be a really good personal statement. You don't want it to be too long. You don't stick to a page, a little over a page, single spaced, I suppose. So yeah, I guess I don't think I really looked at, maybe I did. No one has anything to put on their resume too much at that point. If you've done, I mean, we had a general form you filled out first, and it asked, have you done an REU before? And so that would already be knowledge for us. My thought was that students who had done an REU before wouldn't really be at the top of the pack, because I thought the idea was to give more experience to more people, but turns out the director of the program said, no, if they've done an REU before, that's fine, just rank them the same you would everyone else. It's nice to have a couple of those students in the group, because they can help the other students get through those tough times or those frustrating moments, or let them know that things work out in the end. So definitely apply again. The other thing I did want to comment on, for those who are graduating, and I don't know, you'd have to look in your own field, but in mathematics, for at least for the women anyway, there are a couple programs for the time between undergrad and grad school. So there's a program called EDGE, and so if you're interested in going to grad school in math, you can do this 5-week summer program called EDGE in mathematics if you're a woman. And it's, again, a way to get you to know other women in the field. There aren't necessarily a lot of women, to give you a sort of a network for when you go on. there are also a couple other summer programs that aren't necessarily research-based. So there's a summer program for women in mathematics in Washington, D.C. And you take sort of some mini courses, and you're with 16 other women, 15 other women, still getting paid, just not necessarily doing the research. Yes.
Does anybody have any questions? So on that score, yeah, I mostly talked about REU, and I think that's probably the biggest player in this whole business, right? So, but there are other programs. So this is a link, and I'll write the URL up on the board later on. This is my own website. NASA. So this is sort of a little bit more physics oriented, but in your discipline you can probably find comparable things. So, for example, in physics, NASA has a program. The Department of Energy that runs the United States' nuclear capabilities and runs various national labs has a program called SULI. We actually had a student who did that a few years ago. A little bit like an REU, but it's structured differently. Homeland Security Homeland Security oriented projects that it's called STEM. This is the Federal Department of Homeland Security that has the STEM project. The SPS, that's a physics society. And so anyway, you can get some, if you're in physics or a closely related field, you can get some information from my web page here. But you know, within your own discipline, biology or chemistry or mathematics, you know, you might have to sort of speak to a supervisor, an advisor, you know, and kind of perhaps get some idea about this. One other thing that I should point out is that the kind of place you can go, there to my mind, sort of two basic sorts of places you can, well, maybe three basic places you can get to. The small category are national labs. So in physics, you can go, you know, you can go and work at NIST in Boulder, for example. I think they have an REU program. That's a national lab. There is no classes whatsoever going on there. There might be some graduate students around, but they are just do research. There are people who are paid just to do research. So there are so there are some REU sites at places like that. But then the vast bulk of REU sites are either at large research universities, like the University of Colorado would be an example, or the University of California, Davis. But there are also sites that are at universities which are primarily undergraduate universities, like Colorado Mesa, or I think Central Michigan is a primarily undergraduate. You might have some master's programs and things, but by and large it's undergraduate. So the flavor in those two can be quite different. You know, in a research university, if you go to, say, the University of Colorado, you will see what it looks like to be, well, in grad school at a place like that. If you go to, in my case, I worked at Bucknell University, which is a liberal arts college. They had an REU program in physics. If you go there, well, it doesn't look that much different to, you know, your sort of undergraduate world that you're sort of currently experiencing. And so you might wonder which one should you choose? I would say, you know, the institutions that have the institutions that are primarily undergraduate institutions, you won't get the feel of what a graduate school is like. But the faculty there work all the time with undergraduate students, and they kind of know what sorts of things undergraduate students can typically accomplish. You know, whereas the faculty at the University of Colorado probably very seldom see undergraduate students, and they're not that familiar with what undergraduate students can accomplish. And but if you go to, say, the University of Colorado, you will see what a big research institution looks like. Do you have any other questions? You should, you know.
I kind of forgot the most important thing, so I'll stand back up again.
Hurry up and apply.
The potential for the relationships that you build is, you won't know it yet, and but being on the other side now, I do, like I said, I did the one at Grand Valley State University. I am still in touch with my advisor from there, and not only him, but all the other advisors who were involved. And then since then, I've met all the other faculty in that department at the university. I see them at conferences. We go out to dinner, play poker, whatever. At the conferences, they invited me back to give a talk. They give you an honorarium to do things like that. And so I've been able to build my professional career a little bit through them. When I'm teaching a new class, I might shoot an email and say, hey, what textbook do you like? What do you recommend? And then on the other side of it, when I was at this REU, I had one roommate. female, Audrey, and she ended up going on and getting her PhD in mathematics as well. And her and I still room together at conferences. I'll see her in January. We share hotel rooms with the cost that way. And then in doing that, we bounced ideas off each other last, I guess a year and a half ago, August. We were bouncing ideas off each other. We had a cool teaching idea. We decided then to present it at the next conference. People came up to us and said, hey, you should publish that, and now we have a publication. And the co-author is this girl that I met 12 years ago. We didn't work on the same project, but we shared the apartment together. And there were other people in the program. I'm not as in touch with them, but I always know that I know someone there. You know, they kind of spread out. Everyone's at a different school, and now I've got those contacts in other places. So, not always about the actual results or the research.
Mhm.
I'm in contact with all the people who I was working with in the lab still, and I'm going to the American Chemical Society conference with my professor this year.
Yeah, actually, many of these programs will actually sponsor, travel subsequently to a conference. Like, you go back, you spend the summer doing research, you go back to your undergraduate institution, keep taking courses, and the following spring or something, you go to a conference. So you in that.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I forgot to mention that my REU is will pay for us to go to a national conference and present. So.
Yeah. So if you're in the sciences or mathematics or engineering, and you have some good courses under your belt, I really strongly encourage you to check out these opportunities, apply, and if you get accepted, go.
If you're interested in biology, I know that Walla goes to Ecuador with an REU group every year here at Mesa, and also there will be, hold on. There will be research here this semester for inorganic chemistry, if you guys are interested.
Dave Weinberg.
With Weinberg, yeah. It's not an REU, but it's still paid $10 an hour, so it's a little bit different. But if you're interested in that, you should talk to him for inorganic chemistry. Yeah.
Finished?
I guess.
Should we
Yeah.
take our speaker?
Well, actually, I thank Jamie and Aaron and Lisa Driscoll for coming and helping me, and hopefully next year there'll be 10 of you lined up, to come and describe your experiences.